Pinching. This is not something that happens in the Mediterranean land with someone with a red skirt. Although I've seen it happen, it's pretty bad. Pinching certain plants requires or results in much branchier plants. Impatiens, 30 years ago, had to be pinched. Otherwise, you'd get one shoot here, one shoot there, and it'd be 3 feet long and no color. So they were pre-pinched. Yeah, typically. I'll show you a picture here in a minute. More growing tips means more flowers or fruit or better shaped plants. Many hybrids have been selected for their ability to branch on their own, but other species still benefit from pinching. Basil is one. Now here's some plants that are 8 weeks old that I grew in the basement. This guy was pinched once, right there. You can see what happened. The leaves are bigger. It's got more leaf area total compared to the one that wasn't pinched. Even though it's taller, this thing's going to break off, first good wind or something like that, it's going to break in half. So take a look at the varieties and see if they say pinching. Experiment with when to pinch and how much to pinch back. Basil's when you're going to need it. Other things depends on the variety. Yes, ma'am.
So on the one that wasn't pinched, where would you have pinched that one?
Well, any growing tip, you want to pinch it severely down here. You want to pinch it at this point. You could pinch just a growing tip out.
Okay. Can't you just like the basil, just cut it and use it?
Yes. The pinchings become your first crop for something like this. Absolutely, yes. So one thing I grow starting October 1st every year is a small leaf basil, green bouquet. There's half a dozen or more good small leaf varieties. And you pinch them once or twice. And by Thanksgiving, I've got great hostess gifts. They're about this tall. They're full. Really neat. Hardening off. A lot of people think hardening off is, getting plants to acclimatize themselves to temperature. And part of that is true. But it's more wind and sun that you're worried about. A lot of plants are fairly hardy. In fact, a lot of plants we grow as annuals, like petunias and snapdragons and things like that, are really half-hardy perennials. So we just treat them as annuals. So they can survive some reasonable temperature. But sun scald is an issue. Wind drying can be an issue. So what you do about 2 weeks in advance of putting them in the ground, start exposing them to more and more outside conditions. Don't do it on a cold day or a windy day. If it's below 45 or something like that. I've got a deck which is above the level where I have my greenhouse, and the filtered light from that deck, even though it's south-facing, is perfect to start them off. I start them off close to the house where it's more shade, and then every day I bring them out again, and I use one of those parts carts you see around here. Just wheel them out, and then first a couple hours, and then 3 or 4 hours, and then half the day, and then maybe to a point where it's going to be mild overnight. And that'll get them ready to go in the ground and without a jolt. If you don't do this, what happens is they go in the ground and they either die or they suffer such severe damage that your crop or your flowers are really retarded for quite a while. So hardening off is important.
So you buy something at one of those big cloth stores in the early spring. Would you do the same thing?
Probably not, because they've been grown in outdoor conditions in greenhouses. The problem is when you buy things really early in the box stores, they're betting they're gonna die and you're gonna come back and buy them again. I mean, when you see tomato plants at Lowe's in late March, unless you're going to protect them, and we'll talk about protecting them next week. It's just.
I understand that the big box stores don't mind selling you.
No, they don't. Not at all. So, we'll talk about last frost dates here in a sec, but there it goes. These are data from NOAA Waynesville from 48 to 06. Here's the probability we're going to have another frost, 32 degrees, okay? At the 13th or 12th of April, there's about a 100% chance we're going to have another frost, okay? At the 31st of May, there's probably about a 4% chance we're going to have another frost. And that's actual data. Now, the average last frost date here is the 4th or 5th of May. The 80% safe date, which is what we quote when people say, well, when can I put them in the ground? We quote the 80% safe date, and that's the 15th, Mother's Day, that kind of stuff. Now, you want to jump this, you got to protect things, and there's ways to do that. We'll talk about them next week. Last year, I think our last frost was someplace in like the 10th or 15th of April. It was really, really early. If you've ever read any of my articles, you know that record keeping is a passion. Yeah. You don't know, you can't repeat your successes and eliminate your mistakes or things that didn't go well unless you know what you did. So, write down the stuff that worked and what didn't work. So, for this propagation demo, we need you to keep good records. What'd you do? I mean, it might be as simple as, okay, I'm going to take that tomato plant, take it home, chop it off, and root it in a glass of water. But when did you do it? When did you start seeing roots? That kind of stuff. Okay? Keep good records, at least for this propagation thing. This is my setup. I have replaced these shelves. This is 3 shelves. These are standard shop lights hung from the ceiling, and then 2 from the first shelf and 2 from the second shelf. I have replaced this with a rolling wire shelving unit. And I can get about 15 flats, 5 per shelf here. This is a south-facing window. I can vary the amount of direct sunlight. I have a cheapy dishwasher, sink, and this is my fertilizer drum. In Chicago, I was just doing this in the basement, and I was saving windshield washer solution bottles. Of course, in the north, you go through windshield washer solution quite frequently. I had about a dozen of these bottles. It seemed like I was filling them all the time. Besides, they're all over the place, And this I use for fertilizer. Half strength. I use a half strength liquid or soluble fertilizer like Miracle Grow or Peters or something like that. When I got down here, I bought myself a 30-gallon drum, cut a hole in the top, so I can add 3/4 of a cup of fertilizer, fill it up, and then I just drain it out through a hose right here into the sink. So that's my setup. It's called Eagle Nest Gardens. I'm on Eagle Nest Mountain. Any questions? Oh, here's my diagram. We talked about using diagrams or maps for keeping records before. This is a map of my vegetable garden. Not very big, probably only 250 square feet total. These beds here, for example, you see bed H is 57 wide and 57 deep, so not quite 5 by 5. And this faces south, and I can use this to say, what did I plant last year, so I can do crop rotation and that kind of stuff. Here's my plan, and I do my planning for vegetables in August and September, because the results of last year's crop are firmly in my mind. I know what worked and what didn't, so that's when I do most of the planning. My seeds are ordered by early to mid-December, and I have them before New Year's. So. Yes. Show you in a minute.
So that means that some of these beds are over 5 feet?
No, no. This is the width along the sidewalk. This is the depth away from the sidewalk. Those are just dimensions of the bed.
You mean like the width and the length? Or?
It's width and length, yes, exactly. I'm sorry. There's the sidewalk. Now the sidewalk's about 8 inches of concrete, and we poured right on top of the ground. Then I took 2x8s, and I built the boxes. And then we put, because this gets pretty messy in between, I put boardwalks in here, and I can reach any part of any one of these beds. This is an exception because it's against the fence a bit, with a shovel without stepping on the bed. Now, in the first couple of years, we'll talk about double digging next week. I added a couple inches of organic matter. My initial fill was Lake Junaluska dredgings. I still have a lot of real small, smooth pebble in it. I couldn't find good topsoil, so maybe the stuff over by what used to be Smackers has got good topsoil now, but I couldn't find it. Well, I added a couple inches of organic matter. We'll talk about organic matter sources next week. Every year, and dug them in, because these are all annual beds, effectively, at the time. Maybe a couple perennial herbs here and there, but anything that's just annual vegetables, that got dug up. And then after a while, after about 5 years, the soil, after I dug it up, is spilling out into the sidewalk. So I put 2x2s on top of the 2x4 or 2x8s here to raise the beds up even higher. Now I don't add a whole lot of organic matter unless things have sunk a bit or have had a problem. And it's the garden with the best view in Haywood County. And you'll see this little tub here. We'll talk about that next week. It's a cutworm protector. And that's the 4-lane, and that's where Walmart is now. And that's Richland Balsam. Any questions on seed starting? Again, come on up. You're welcome to take any of these. If you want to split them with somebody, I got a pair of scissors, we can cut them up. I have extra plastic here. Any of these seeds in the bag are fair game. And